What happened today at the facility, known to the outside world only by a designation on a map, a place where the government does not officially confirm operations, does not publicly discuss personnel, and does not under any circumstances invite scrutiny, crossed a threshold that officials had long hoped would hold. And when that threshold was crossed, the response did not hesitate. It came with speed, with precision, and with the kind of total operational silence that tells you, more than any press release ever could, that something significant has happened. The gates are sealed, the airspace is closed, and tonight nobody inside that fence is talking. For months now, there had been signals, not from official briefings, not from congressional testimony, just signals, that the facility at the center of tonight's story was preparing for something unusual. This base has always been secretive, yes, but it has been methodically secretive in that secrecy. Its operations have followed a certain rhythm, a cadence, almost a predictable heartbeat if you knew how to read it, scheduled test windows, rotational staff transfers, aircraft departures logged only in classified systems, supply convoys moving on patterns that, to the trained eye, told a story of routine. But what set off alarm bells in the defense intelligence community this week was that the rhythm went silent. Analysts who monitor classified installations know the indicators: the pattern of flight operations at restricted airfields, the movement of specialized ground support equipment, the rotation of security perimeter teams, the sudden halt of contractor vehicle traffic in and out of the facility. All of that went quiet. No rotations, no departures, no transfers in or out. And whenever a facility operating at that classification level goes quiet, truly completely quiet, it means one of two things: either something went wrong or something is about to. Early this morning, defense monitoring systems detected what sources close to the situation described as an anomalous security event, including a full perimeter lockdown protocol that had not been activated in over 11 years. Let that number sink in. 11 years. These are the kinds of emergency procedures that this facility only initiates when they are signaling something very specific: a security breach, an uncontrolled incident, or a threat that exists either inside the wire or is believed to be moving toward it. Defense observers didn't immediately know which category this fell into, or whether in the worst case assessment it fell into all three simultaneously. But what became clear within the first hour was that this was not a drill. Drills are announced. Drills have paper trails. Drills don't ground every aircraft in a restricted airspace corridor spanning hundreds of miles without a cover explanation already prepared. This had no cover explanation. The FAA issued a notice to airmen and what's known as a NOTAM, restricting a vast sector of airspace over the Nevada desert effective immediately, and citing only a vague national security exercise. But sources familiar with how this facility operates told a very different story. This wasn't an exercise. This was a lockdown, real, total, and unprecedented in recent memory. The internal emergency declaration issued by facility commanders tonight was not a routine security escalation. It was not a standard protocol review. It was not a precautionary measure triggered by a false alarm. It was urgent, it was absolute, and it carried the kind of language in its classification headers that analysts who've spent careers in the intelligence community describe as reserved only for events of genuine consequence. Source after source who spoke to contacts familiar with this facility's procedures described the trigger event as unprecedented in its speed of escalation, deeply concerning in its implications for what it suggests about the threat environment, and perhaps most importantly, deliberate in a way that rules out accident or malfunction. Deliberate. That word matters, because deliberate means someone made a choice. Deliberate means this wasn't a system failure or a human error. Deliberate means there is an actor inside this situation who intended for this to happen. And when you're talking about America's most classified defense installation, the idea that something deliberate triggered a full lockdown is not a bureaucratic concern. It is a national security emergency. The response from facility leadership was not slow. It was not cautious to the point of paralysis. Within 2 hours of the triggering event, every non-essential access point was sealed. Vehicle traffic in and out was suspended entirely. Personnel already inside were placed under internal movement restrictions, and the airspace overhead, already among the most controlled in the continental United States, was extended and reinforced. These weren't standard perimeter protocols. These were the deep layer procedures, the ones that exist in binders that most people working at this facility have never seen opened, that commanders only activate when they are preparing for the possibility of a sustained, serious, and unresolved threat. Tonight, sources confirmed that security teams launched a comprehensive internal sweep of the facility's most sensitive sectors, including areas that had recently undergone what analysts believe was a classified systems upgrade tied to next-generation capabilities currently in development. Security personnel moved before any potential threat could advance further. They locked down Sector 1, the primary administrative and command hub. They locked down the deep access research corridors. They locked down the flight line and adjacent hangars that were, by all accounts, actively servicing assets whose existence is not publicly acknowledged. In other words, they secured the nervous system of the facility, the command infrastructure that would make any compromised operation actionable. This is what made the initial trigger so alarming to officials. Whatever happened, whatever set this in motion, it wasn't aimed at the perimeter. It was aimed at the core. This represented the kind of incident that could, if not contained, compromise years, potentially decades, of classified research and development that the United States has invested in this location. And the security apparatus, understanding that, fully responded not with hesitation, but with total commitment. They didn't overreact publicly. There were no official statements, no press conferences, no acknowledgement of any kind, but internally the response was overwhelming. They hit the communication lockdown protocols. They hit the personnel containment procedures. They activated the external coordination channels that exist specifically for scenarios when this facility needs federal law enforcement and military reinforcement without creating a visible public footprint. And here's where the story becomes even more complex. Intelligence analysts now believe that whatever triggered tonight's lockdown may have been designed, at least in part, to test the response capability of the facility's security architecture during a period of elevated operational tempo. This facility has been running hot for months. New programs in acceleration, new assets being tested, new personnel integrated into deeply classified teams under tight timelines. And when a facility is running hot, its security posture, however elite, carries inherent vulnerabilities, not in its hardware, not in its perimeter infrastructure, but in its human layer, the people, the contractors, the technicians, the support staff who cycle in and out under agreements they cannot discuss with their own families, the individuals who know the most sensitive details of what happens inside those walls and carry that knowledge with them every time they leave. Security analysts speaking under strict anonymity describe the nature of this kind of threat as a pressure test, a deliberate attempt to see how the system responds when it is stressed at multiple points simultaneously. But the facility's response today demonstrated something that adversaries, whether foreign intelligence services, insider threats, or any other category of actor, should find deeply instructive. This installation does not freeze. It does not deliberate while a threat is active. It responds with a totality that goes beyond what most defense facilities in the world are capable of executing at this speed. Their lockdown was not only comprehensive, it was calibrated so precisely that within 3 hours of the initial trigger, every known vulnerability point had been addressed, every sensitive sector had been isolated, and the facility had effectively gone dark to the outside world in a way that preserved all internal operational continuity. That matters because it shows this is not a facility caught off guard. It shows that years of preparation, contingency planning, tabletop exercises, classified drills that happen behind schedules nobody outside the wire ever sees, produced exactly the kind of response tonight that those preparations were designed to create. As reports continued filtering through intelligence and defense channels throughout the evening, we began to understand the true scale of what was put into motion tonight. Airspace control was extended to a radius not seen since a classified systems test went off nominal in the early 2000s, effectively creating a dead zone over a significant portion of the Nevada desert that civilian aviation had to reroute around without explanation. Ground-based radar installations that supplement the facility's own detection infrastructure were placed on active tracking status, a designation that means they are not passively monitoring but are actively querying anything that moves within their range. Federal law enforcement assets operating in the broader region were placed on a quiet standby status, operating under instructions that were described by one source as coordinated but invisible, meaning active support without the kind of visible presence that would create a public footprint. This wasn't just a base going to high alert. This wasn't just a security team running a sweep. This was the full activation of an integrated response architecture that exists across multiple agencies, multiple jurisdictions, and multiple layers of classification, all pointed at one location, all moving in concert, all operating in the same window of time. And the operational silence surrounding all of it is, in some ways, the most remarkable detail of everything that has unfolded tonight. In an era where information moves instantly and secrets have a shorter shelf life than they once did, the fact that this lockdown has remained as contained as it has, that official channels have said nothing, that the facility's public-facing identity has produced no ripple, speaks to the depth of the protocols in play. For every advance that outside actors have made in trying to penetrate the information shield around this facility, the people who run this place have countered with something that closes another door. Remember, there have been those who believed this facility's era of critical relevance had passed. They thought the most sensitive work had moved elsewhere. They thought the next generation of classified programs didn't need the Nevada desert anymore. That dispersed, networked, distributed development had made a single fixed location obsolete. They thought the lockdown infrastructure was legacy architecture, maintained out of habit more than genuine operational necessity. But tonight, the exact opposite is on full display. The facility is not obsolete. It is active, acutely active. The infrastructure is not legacy. It is tested and functional under real-world stress. And the programs that reportedly triggered tonight's emergency response are not historical artifacts of Cold War secrecy. They are current, they are classified at the highest levels, and they are, by every account available tonight, worth protecting with the full weight of America's most capable security apparatus. What makes this moment so significant and so revealing is that the lockdown happened at a moment when this facility was already operating under extraordinary pressure. Multiple programs reportedly in concurrent development phases, a classified systems integration timeline that was, by several accounts, already running behind schedule, personnel rotations that were compressed to meet operational demands, and an external threat environment that intelligence assessors had flagged. In classified reporting that circulates at the very top of the national security structure as increasingly aggressive toward exactly the kind of targets this facility represents. Different factions within the national security community want different things from this moment. Counterintelligence officials want a clean sweep that identifies every thread of the threat and removes it completely. Program managers want minimum disruption to development timelines that have congressional and executive level attention. Security architects want the incident studied forensically to understand what worked, what didn't, and what needs to change. And oversight officials want answers, real answers, about how a trigger event of this magnitude reached activation threshold before it was caught earlier in the chain. The facility's leadership is balancing all of these demands simultaneously while maintaining a total operational blackout to the outside world. And that is perhaps the most extraordinary management challenge in American national security tonight. The internal directive now circulating through relevant classified channels was designed to send a clear signal. The integrity of this installation is not negotiable, and the response to any threat at any level will be proportional to the worst-case assessment, not the most optimistic one. Officials with awareness of the situation said plainly that the triggering event was inconsistent with acceptable security parameters for a facility of this classification. That is careful bureaucratic language for something happened here that should not have been possible, and we are treating it with the gravity that represents. You do not hear that framing from officials at this level of classification unless what is at stake is genuinely serious. This is not language designed for a press release. This is language designed to ensure that everyone within the relevant command structure understands the same thing simultaneously. Tonight is not a routine night. And whatever decisions get made in the next 24 to 72 hours will define the security posture of this facility and potentially others like it for years to come. Meanwhile, the senior official responsible for facility operations reportedly addressed internal staff in a brief, direct, and unambiguous communication earlier tonight. The substance of that communication, as described by sources aware of its contents, every protocol exists for a reason. Tonight, those reasons became real. Execute your assignments, trust your training. We handle this from the inside. And then, the people outside that gate do not need to know what happens inside it. That has always been true. It is especially true tonight. And finally, we have handled every challenge this facility has ever faced. We will handle this one. These are not motivational platitudes. These are statements from leadership that understands with complete clarity that the personnel inside that fence tonight are the most important variable in this entire situation, because hardware can be replaced, programs can be rebuilt, but the people who carry the knowledge of what happens inside a facility like this cannot be reconstructed if that knowledge is lost, compromised, or extracted. The commander knows that. And tonight, every person inside those sealed gates knows it too. Here is what makes the situation even more concerning when viewed in full context. Tonight's lockdown did not happen in isolation. Alongside the primary event at the facility itself, intelligence channels have flagged several concurrent developments that, taken individually, might be explainable. Taken together, they form a picture that analysts describe as coordinated pressure. A significant increase in surveillance overflights near classified airspace corridors in the western United States was logged in the past 72 hours, activity that defense tracking systems flagged, but that did not, on its own, trigger escalation. Electronic intelligence gathering activity targeting frequency bands associated with classified test operations showed a notable spike in the same window, and human intelligence reporting, the kind that comes from sources who are close to the threat and operate at considerable personal risk, indicated that interest in this specific facility had intensified among at least one foreign intelligence service in recent months. All of this happened in the same compressed timeline. When multiple pressure points activate simultaneously around a target of this sensitivity, the professional assessment is not coincidence. The professional assessment is orchestration. Analysts tonight are working through several scenarios. One is that tonight's event was the culmination of a long-running intelligence operation against this facility, one that finally reached an action phase after a prolonged preparation period. Another is that what happened was an insider event, not necessarily malicious in origin, but a security failure rooted in the human layer of the facility's protection architecture that created a vulnerability someone exploited. A third possibility, the one that is generating the most serious concern among officials with access to tonight's full intelligence picture, is that the event was designed not to extract information, but to map the facility's response architecture, to learn how fast the lockdown comes, to learn what triggers it, to learn what the facility looks like from the outside when it activates its deepest protocols, because that knowledge, the knowledge of how this place responds to a threat, is itself a weapon in the hands of someone patient enough to use it. But tonight's response addressed that possibility directly. The facility did not follow a textbook lockdown sequence that could be documented and analyzed. They adapted in real time. They varied their response patterns. They did not give a clean, readable signature to anyone watching from the outside, which means if the goal was to map their response, they got a map of something that will never look the same way twice. What we are watching tonight is a test of institutional resilience. The threat, whatever form it took, wanted to see whether this facility could be rattled, whether its protocols would hold under real-world pressure, whether the human beings inside it would maintain discipline when the abstract suddenly became concrete. The facility wants to demonstrate to its own personnel, to its oversight structure, and to any actor watching that it cannot be destabilized by a single event, no matter how significant. The intelligence community wants to prevent tonight from becoming a data point in someone else's targeting cycle, and the national security leadership wants to prevent tonight from becoming the first chapter of a longer story, one that ends with the compromise of programs that represent some of the most consequential classified work the United States government is currently conducting. Those are not small stakes. Those are the stakes that, when you step back and see them clearly, explain why the gates are sealed, why the airspace is closed, and why the people who know the most about what happened tonight are saying the least. Tonight, we've heard from sources who are now monitoring the situation across multiple intelligence channels. They say the lockdown remains fully in effect with no indication of a planned drawdown in the immediate term, suggesting that whatever triggered the event has not yet been fully resolved or assessed. They say internal teams are working through a layered security review that will likely take days, not hours, to complete, and that the findings will be classified at a level that will prevent any meaningful public accounting of what occurred. And they say the facility's decision to execute such a complete and rapid lockdown is likely part of a broader institutional posture shift that was already underway before tonight. One intended to address the changing threat environment that classified installations like this one now face in an era of more capable, more patient, and more sophisticated adversaries. But here is what is also true tonight. The facility is intact. The programs inside it are, as best as can be assessed, secure. The personnel are safe, and the response, comprehensive, calibrated, and executed without a single public word, sent a message that required no press release, no official statement, and no acknowledgement of any kind. It sent a message simply by happening. The message, we are prepared, we respond completely, and we do not need you to know the details to understand the outcome. As the night goes on and tomorrow's daylight brings whatever it brings to this situation, we expect that the official silence will hold, because that is what this facility does, and that is what it has always done. But what we do know is that tonight's lockdown was not an overreaction. It prevented a vulnerable window from becoming an exploited one. It demonstrated that the investment in response architecture, the years of planning, the classified exercises, the protocols that exist in binders most people will never see, produced results under real conditions. And it reminded everyone paying attention that this facility, whatever its official designation, whatever its public non-presence, remains one of the most consequential pieces of America's national security infrastructure. What happens next will depend on what the investigation uncovers in the coming days. If the threat is found to have been contained before any material compromise occurred, tonight will be remembered as a successful stress test. Painful, serious, but ultimately a demonstration of capability. If deeper vulnerabilities are found in the course of the review, the people responsible for this installation have already shown tonight that they are not the kind of institution that discovers a problem and looks away. They have shown they are ready to respond to whatever comes, in whatever form it takes. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, the desert around America's most secretive base is genuinely, completely still. No aircraft overhead, no vehicles at the gate, no communications leaving the fence line that anyone on the outside can read, just silence. And a perimeter that is sealed tight against a world that officially doesn't even know this night is happening. But when a place like this goes quiet, it means the people inside are not standing down. They are working, they are investigating, they are deciding what tonight means and what tomorrow requires. Because tonight, whatever triggered this lockdown learned something that this facility has demonstrated over and over again across decades of classified operation. You do not get inside without consequence. You do not probe without a response. And you do not threaten what exists behind those gates without activating a level of institutional resolve that no amount of sophisticated planning fully prepares you for. This story is far from over. The investigation will take days. The full picture may take years to reach any kind of public light, if it ever does. But tonight, one thing is clear. America's most secretive installation was tested. It held. And it did so in a silence so total, so deliberate, and so complete that the silence itself is the loudest thing that happened today. We will be here watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.